stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am reviewing the Seeker cards in Dark Side of the Moon, the third Mythos pack in the Dream Eater cycle. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support and Cole Monroe Chitty for his fantastic art that graces the splash screen. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these reviews. If you'd like to become a patron to support the channel's goals and see your name in lights, follow the link down below, sign up for a tier, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Without further ado, let's get started. The first Seeker card in the pack is Practice Makes Perfect. It's a one-cost Seeker event with willpower and intellect skill icons and the Gambit and Tactic traits. It's fast, and you may play it during a skill test at your location. It has the following game text: search the top 9 cards of your deck for a practiced skill and commit it to this skill test if able. Shuffle the remaining cards back into your deck. After this test ends, if it was successful, add that skill to your hand instead of discarding it. I was fortunate enough to spoil Practice Makes Perfect before the release of Dark Side of the Moon, so a lot of what I have to say here may sound familiar. There are relatively few ways to return a skill card to your hand so that you can leverage its ability repeatedly. I can think of only a handful off the top of my head: Mente Fan, Silas Marsh, and William York's Elder Sign abilities, and the Survivor recursion tech such as Resourceful and True Survivor. As you can see, the ability to return skill cards to your hand is typically associated with the Survivor class, so the fact that Practice Makes Perfect is a Seeker card that does something similar is noteworthy. Cards that search your deck for other cards are a dime a dozen in the Seeker card pool, and Practice Makes Perfect lets a Seeker or off-class Seeker search their deck for a very specific type of card that is a skill with the Practice trait. If the investigator finds a skill with the Practice trait in the top 9 cards of their deck, they commit it to a skill test at their location if able. The investigator who plays Practice Makes Perfect doesn't necessarily need to be the one making the skill test, so you may use this card to help other investigators in multiplayer. If that skill test ends successfully, the investigator gets to return that skill to their hand so they may commit it again to a subsequent skill test. Committing one skill card to 2 different skill tests is a fantastic trick if you can pull it off. Practice Makes Perfect searches your deck so it synergizes with Astounding Revelation from the Dream Eaters. If Astounding Revelation is among the top 9 cards of your deck when you play Practice Makes Perfect, you've got an interesting choice to make. Gain 2 resources so you can come out a resource ahead, which is always nice, or add a secret to a card such as Mr. Rook, who may spend that secret as a free triggered ability to search your deck for yet another card. Basically, you pay Practice Makes Perfect to search your deck for a skill, then trigger Astounding Revelation to stack a secret on Mr. Rook so you can search your deck again, grabbing a card and potentially triggering yet another copy of Astounding Revelation. There are several investigators who might be interested in Practice Makes Perfect. Whenever you are discussing a card that affects skill tests, you should immediately think of Mente Fan. If Min plays Practice Makes Perfect, she may search the top 9 cards of her deck for a skill with the Practice trait, commit that skill to the skill test, and add a wild skill icon to it, improving the odds she'll get to add the skill to her hand so she can pull off the trick again. Add Astounding Revelation and Mr. Rook to the mix, and you've got a potent combination on your hands. Unfortunately, Practice Makes Perfect doesn't synergize with Min's signature asset, Analytical Mind, since you may play Practice Makes Perfect only during a skill test at Min's location. Practice Makes Perfect also synergizes with Mandy Thompson, who may use it to search 3 additional cards for a total of 12, or resolve 1 additional target of the search so you can commit 2 skill cards with the Practice trait to the skill test. If the skill test is successful, you get to return both skills to your hand. If you search the deck and find an occult evidence, you can trigger that too. Just watch out for Mandy's weakness, Shocking Discovery, or the search will be cancelled. Practice Makes Perfect has the Tactic trait, so Mark Harrigan can play it to search his deck for several cards, including his signature skill, the Homefront, Overpower from the core set, Take the Initiative from the Boundary Beyond, or either level of Vicious Blow. If Practice Makes Perfect has a fault, it's the fact that the skills with the Practice trait are few and far between. There are only about 16 of them in the game, scattered across all 5 classes and the neutral cards, so investigators will be hard-pressed to include a lot of them in their deck, which in turn will lower the odds of finding a relevant skill card when they search the top 9 cards of their deck. MINH Fan, for example, can play either level of deduction from the core set, Stunning Blow from Threads of Fate, and 2 neutral skills from the core set, Overpower and Perception. While deduction sees play in most, if not all, MINH decks over at Arkham DB, Overpower and Perception are far less common inclusions. It doesn't make much sense to me for MINH to play Practice Makes Perfect at the moment unless she is playing a significant number of cards with the Practice trait, and even then there are going to be only 2 to 4 relevant targets depending on the skill test. This could change, of course, as more cards with the Practice trait are released. Depending on her deck building options, Mandy can play Deduction, Perception, and Overpower, as well as Hatchet Man from the Boundary Beyond, Momentum from the Search for Kadath, Enraptured from the Boundary Beyond, Prophecy from the Circle Undone, Torrent of Power from the Pallid Mask, or Stunning Blow from Threads of Fate. However, Mandy decks that I've seen posted online tend to stick with Deduction, Perception, and possibly Enraptured. Again, that's not many targets for Practice Makes Perfect. Mandy could have some fun with Practice Makes Perfect if she's able to play cards such as Deduction, Enraptured, or Momentum twice. Deduction lets you discover additional clues, while Enraptured provides additional charges or secrets. Theoretically, you could use Practice Makes Perfect to generate 2 additional charges or secrets, which is a good value. Momentum is an interesting option since Mandy could use 1 copy to help her pass up to 4 skill tests. First, she commits it to a skill test. If she passes that skill test with flying colors, she gets to reduce the difficulty of the next skill test that phase and return momentum to her hand so she can rinse and repeat the process on 2 more skill tests. Investigators with access to the Rogue card pool have a couple of other interesting options. Assuming Mandy Thompson has 1 or 2 copies of 3 aces in her hand, she can play Practice Makes Perfect to fetch the second and or third copy so she can commit all 3 to a skill test to automatically succeed, draw 3 cards, and gain 3 resources. Mandy can also play Practice Makes Perfect to fetch Daredevil Zero, a rogue skill that will be released in the Winifred Habermock Investigator starter deck. If Mandy fetches Daredevil Zero, it would trigger, allowing her to fetch yet another rogue skill and commit it to the skill test too. Amanda Sharp and Trish Scarborough, the Seeker and Rogue investigators who will be released in the Innsmouth Conspiracy, can pull off similar tricks with Practice Makes Perfect. They also have the option of fetching Daredevil 2 from Point of No Return. Surprisingly, Mark Harrigan decks tend to play a lot of cards that you can target with Practice Makes Perfect. The Homefront and Vicious Blow are in every Mark Harrigan deck, while Take the Initiative makes the cut more often than not. If you're playing multiplayer, Leadership from Where Doom Awaits is another option you may want to consider. Mark is going to be a happy camper if he can play any of those skills multiple times with Practice Makes Perfect. Practice Makes Perfect is a tutor and a recursion card rolled into one neat package. Playing the same skill card twice is difficult unless you're playing MINH Fan or Survivor recursion shenanigans, so the ability to double up on Deduction, Vicious Blow, or Enraptured is welcome. There aren't that many cards with the practice trait, but the ones we do have tend to see quite a bit of play depending on the deck. I doubt that I would include Practice Makes Perfect if I was playing only Deduction or Vicious Blow, because the odds that you'll come up empty-handed are much higher, but I would certainly consider it if I was playing a suite of cards such as Deduction, Perception, and Enraptured, or Vicious Blow, the Homefront, and Take the Initiative. The second Seeker card in the pack is Extensive Research. It's a 10 cost event, that's right, 10 resources, that costs 1 experience point. It has 2 intellect skill icons and the Insight trait. It has the following game text: reduce the cost to play Extensive Research by 1 for each other card in your hand. Discover 2 clues at your location. The most expensive card in the game, Extensive Research, has been designed with a specific type of deck in mind, a deck that wants to maximize its hand size and draw all the cards. That style of deck received some support recently with the release of Dream Enhancing Serum in 1,000 Shapes of Horror, and several more cards will be released in the Harvey Walters Investigator starter deck later this year. Harvey Walters, his signature asset Vault of Knowledge, and the Seleno Fragments encourage players to have 10 to 15 cards in their hand. Extensive Research is a no-brainer in this type of deck, especially if you enjoy playing multiplayer on hard or expert difficulty. The ability to discover 2 clues for free without making a skill test is simply fantastic in those formats. Extensive Research is valuable in other formats as well. Many scenarios, including Dark Side of the Moon, feature at least one location with an extremely high shroud value that will push a 5 intellect seeker like Harvey Walters to the limit. Extensive Research lets a seeker grab those clues without wasting precious time and resources trying to pass a difficult intellect skill test. Harvey Walters is an obvious candidate to play Extensive Research. There are a couple of other investigators who might be interested in picking it up too. 2 of them, MINH Fan and Mandy Thompson, are pictured on the card. The other investigator who may be interested in extensive research is Joe Diamond. Extensive research has the insight trait, which means it's fair game for Joe's hunch deck. Joe's forced effect lets him play the top card of his hunch deck at -2 cost, so extensive research is already slightly cheaper for him to play. If Joe can keep his hand size at or around 8 cards, then he can play extensive research for free too. Extensive research may have the highest printed resource cost of any card in the game, but if you're playing it in an investigator who can maximize their hand size, you should be able to play it for free most of the time. Discovering 2 clues without making a skill test for free is a fantastic ability to have at your fingertips, especially if you get stuck at a high shroud location or you're playing on hard or expert difficulty. If you're playing an investigator who doesn't really care about how many cards are in their hand, then you're probably better off purchasing a different upgrade. If I was desperate to discover clues, I wouldn't hesitate to spend a couple of resources on extensive research, but 10 resources is a big ask for most ordinary decks. That's going to do it for my review of the Seeker cards in Dark Side of the Moon. Practice Makes Perfect's value depends a lot on the number of skills with the practice trait that are in your deck. If you're playing a lot of those skills, it's definitely worth a look. Otherwise, you can probably leave it in the binder. There aren't a lot of skills with the practice trait in any one class, so if you want to leverage Practice Makes Perfect, you'll probably want to draw on practice skills from 2 or more classes, say Guardian, Seeker, or Seeker Mystic. There are a few interesting options in the Rogue class too. As for extensive research, it's really intended to go in one type of deck, a deck that tries to maximize its hand size so you can play it for free. Harvey Walters is the obvious choice, but he won't be released until August. Minte Fan, Mandy Thompson, and Joe Diamond are also viable options, although you'll probably need to play cards such as Laboratory Assistant and Dream Enhancing Serum to help them reach that 8 to 10 card threshold. That's going to do it for this review. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Head over to Patreon to become a patron of the channel and support the channel's goals. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.